Hi, everyone. We're live. We are the Spirit Drivers. I'm Elise Dorset.
And I'm Greg Gerdeau. It's really nice to have you all with us this morning.
Yes. And I am a relationship coach. Greg is a business advisor and many other things. And Spirit Drivers is a place to uplift your spirit. It's a place for professionals who are going through change, who are going through crises, difficult times, to uplift your spirit and find some hope. We offer digital forums. That's a confidential group to support you as you go through a challenging time.
The other thing that we do is we offer a 4-month course to help you actually get back on track and come out better. That's the real goal of Spirit Drivers, the course, as well as the confidential groups called forums, which are very powerful tools to help people really get back on track as fast as possible.
Yes, and we're so excited to be here today with Jason Robertson. I'm going to tell you a little bit about Jason. He is a jack of all trades. I can relate to that. He's a serial hobbyist, a brand new dad 9 months ago, and an extremely new entrepreneur. He is hardwired to see the future as a reality to shape instead of a dream we wake up to, which is exactly why we invited him on. He's trained to carve an operational path to the future and adjust in real time to shifting conditions. He combines data and human insight to make decisions and tell compelling stories. Jason lost his job this year in 2020, and he lost something intangible along with it. Now he's climbing out with a fresh sense of value and purpose, and we're going to hear his story today. Jason is going to share how to shift your story and change your perspective during a dark moment, how to spot opportunities to pivot, and how you can be part of the future that you want to see. So without further ado, let's welcome on Jason. Hello, welcome.
Good morning, and thank you all for having me today.
Yeah. So Jason, let's dive right in. Tell us your story about what happened during COVID.
Sure, yeah. So you mentioned some of this at the beginning there, but let me tell you some context first. So my wife and I moved down from New York City to Washington, D.C. for a job at Marriott International about almost 2 years ago now. And then right after we moved down here, my wife got pregnant. And so we bought a house we were living in a small apartment. And so we bought a house to sort of grow our family and our life in. And then my son was born on December 28th, 2019. And I took a few weeks off from Marriott to, sort of understand our new life a little bit. And then, so I got back to work in February of 2019. And it was April in 2020, when Marriott, the pandemic really hit Marriott hard. Hotels were shutting down all over the world, and they decided to furlough a huge portion. I think something like 80% of the corporate staff, along with a lot of hotels shutting down. So an enormous reduction in workforce in the short term. And that was super, super hard for me for a lot of reasons. One is I had suddenly a new mouth to feed. I had this new mortgage that I had sort of recently had. And then there's another probably just as important part where for me, my work has always been a really critical part of my personality. It's something that I put a lot of energy into, and it's something I always have put a lot of energy into. I really like working. I really like being productive. And so when I got furloughed, it was just personally really hard. And I think that the message at first was I think everybody was thinking this thing is going to blow over quickly. It'll be 60 days, 90 days, and then we'll all be back to work. And it became pretty clear about a month in that was not going to be true. And then the sort of dread the dread started to sink in a little bit. Okay, what are we going to do for work? How are we going to pay the bills? How are we going to, what's the future look like? And I would say that I at first I panicked a little bit. And I've always been a saver, and we had enough money for a little while. But at first I panicked. I was like, holy shit, like how am I going to feed this family, and how am I going to keep a roof over our mouth? And panic mode sort of led to a few like really frantic actions that did absolutely no good for anybody. Like I pinged a whole bunch of people in my network in a sort of like desperate email saying, "Hey, I'm free to work. Like, what can I do for you?" And a few people sent back sympathies, and absolutely zero work came from it. And another thing that panic mode sort of brought on was just sort of like like this cycle of not getting work, like panicking, doing stuff and not getting work was really hard on me personally, because I was doing a lot of things, but nothing was fruitful. And it just sort of ate away at my like confidence as I went through this cycle. Like, one, being furloughed, that's one thing, and then two is like trying to get back on the horse a little bit, and that was sort of a deflating, sort of consistently deflating. Even if I get some hopes up, I get a little traction, then it would end, and I would get even more deflated. And it was probably a few months after that I started to, I finally landed one good size contract freelance work, building a brand for a new, for an old friend of mine, and a new sort of startup, which I thought was super interesting work. We did some really great stuff out there. It's called Skylark. It's a brand that's study abroad for neurodiverse kids, students, which is really cool. It's an opportunity that students wouldn't have an opportunity to do before. And I would say that was the first thing that sort of grounded me a little bit. And I don't remember exactly when it happened, but it was probably 2 or maybe even 3 months after being furloughed. And that's when things started to like turn around or take a little bit of shape. Like I felt like, okay, I can do this a little bit.
Right.
You had purpose.
That's a good long time. Sorry, Greg.
Yeah. So yes, it did take. It was quite a long time, and it suddenly, it was a little bit of give and take, right? Like I was at the same time discovering how much work, like a work purpose, was important to my life. Mm-hmm. And I think at the same time sort of reducing how much a work purpose was important to my life. And, probably having our son helped a bit too. Like watching a 3-month-old turn into a 4, 5, and 6-month-old is a crazy experience, as you know, Greg. And that sort of took that helped me a little bit. There was some purpose in that, of like, there's always something to do, and there's always something to learn, and there's always something to grow in that respect, or help him grow in that respect. But yeah, it was tough for a long time. And it wasn't until sort of 2, 3, maybe 4 months out of it that I started to shift how I thought about it, and how I started to lift out of it a little bit.
Jason, at that point in time, did you actually recognize that there's a completely wonderfully different mindset from being a corporate employee to being an entrepreneur? Or was it scary? I'm asking your experience.
Yeah, I've had the benefit of working in startups before. And so some of that, I've never personally been an entrepreneur, but until recently, but I had that sort of sense of scariness, and the cliff that's always a little bit beyond. It's part of the reason I went to a big corporate, is for some stability in my life to do these other things I wanted to do. So yeah, I would say there's a few things that happened for me in the last 6 or 8 months. That terror started to, and terror may be a strong word, but it sometimes the dread that the weight and the dread that I felt was real. But I would say it started to give way to a confidence and a freeingness. One of the things I learned is that, with not that much effort, it wasn't hard for me to make enough money to cover the bills. And that was extremely comforting, because it meant that, like, no matter what happens to any one gig, I can probably make enough money to keep us afloat. So we're not going to be destitute. And we might eat more beans than we used to eat, but nothing's going to go wrong, right? Like, we're not going to be really destitute or anything. And so, yeah, I think that feeling of dread of losing my corporate job started to give way to a sense of freedom of being my own boss, right? Like, I started a consulting company, and then started working with a startup as well, and still consulting with corporates, and so suddenly got very busy, and was sort of setting my own hours and making my own schedule, and it was great. I was able to both enjoy the time with my family and work the amount I wanted to work, and pay all the bills at the same time. And it sort of like it grounded me in a different way. Whereas I was always afraid to lose my job, it became I'll never call it a blessing. I wouldn't wish it on anybody, but it became a bit of a gift in the sense that I know that I can do it. Like, I don't have to be afraid of it anymore.
Mm-hmm. That's amazing. Jason, can you take us back to that period, those dark moments? Because I know that that's something that a lot of people are going through or are afraid of now. And I would love to know, what was it that did not help? You kind of mentioned that, but also I'm interested in, from other people, like, what are some things that people said or did that just didn't help? And then also, what are the things that you did that did start to get you out of that place really specifically?
Yeah. Okay. So, the things other people said and did, there's often like a very well-intentioned platitudes, like, oh, it'll turn around, you'll get back on your feet, those kind of things. And they never helped. In fact, they just sort of like ground, they like sort of ground into the it's like rubbing salt in a wound. It was just like, it's bad now, and I don't need somebody to tell me it's going to be okay. I need somebody to tell me, like, how to get out of it, right? And so just saying that it was going to be okay was often really frustrating for me. There were a few things that I would say sort of maybe accidentally helped me through this. The first is just like having people to talk to and talking about it in general, like sharing how you're feeling, sharing how you're thinking, what you're going through. And I'm fortunate to have the kind of relationship with my wife where we can talk about things pretty openly. Like, we talk about money, we talk about all sorts of things pretty openly. She also went through a relatively dark period in her career a few years ago, and I helped her through that. And funny enough, what was happening in the last few months is she was like, you know what you would tell me? And she would just play things back to me. And I'd be like, damn it, you're right. So that was really useful.
So your own advice was useful back to you. That's good.
For sure. And a big part of that was just like getting me out of where I was today and sort of looking into the future a little bit. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. It's not all my wife. I also had a professional coach that I worked with, where she sort of knew me well from two different jobs, and she knows me pretty personally pretty well, but not as well as my wife. And so it's like it's a different kind of interaction that we have. And then I have some friends that I, of course, talk with and share with, and that's even a different dimension. And I think one of the things I've learned is that there's no one person that we all have multiple facets to ourselves, and I there's things I share with different people in different ways, and it was doing that. It was really helpful. It was really helpful to talk about things in different ways with different people and sort of get different points of view and push and pull on my thinking a little bit. That started to that really helped me over time. I wouldn't say there's any sort of silver bullet there, but being able to share how I was feeling and how I was thinking diffused some of the challenges. Having my wife play back some of the advice she's given me was really helpful, because it helped lift me up and look forward a little bit instead of wallowing in the like down times. It also helped to have some purpose with my son to like actually do stuff, not just like sit on the couch and watch TV or whatever, just wallow in self-pity. You can see I'm working in a basement, so it's easy to lose track of time down here too. And so that was all really useful. It's like having the conversations, telling people how I was feeling and getting feedback on those things was all really great. There's another thing that accidentally started to happen, and it was probably in like July or August that this started to happen. And one of the things was I was having every conversation I could with anybody that I could, informal, formal, jobs, not jobs, just chatting with people and connecting with people again, people I've known in the past, people I haven't known in the past. And at least that's how you and I met, for example. Yeah. And those were all really great. And I found that there's an element to sharing my story with other people that started to take shape for me and started to change how I looked at my own perspective. And one of the things that happened is like I would tell stories about, depending on how I was feeling during that day or that week, I would tell a story that was sort of a want story, and then I would never have a really good feeling from that conversation. And then other days I would tell a story when I was feeling better or I was feeling energetic, and I would tell a different kind of story, and I would sort of reframe what I had been going through in a different way. And it was as much as experiment, me telling my own story, as it was. It was never false. It was never a lie. It was just a different way of looking at the same information, and it was a different way of sort of exploring how to tell my story. And I would find that when I told the story a different way, I would engage with people differently. Not only would they sort of engage differently, but I would be engaging differently. And there's this sort of magic cycle that happened where I sort of started to hone my own story in a different way that helped me not only connect with other people, but helped me own the experience myself in a way that it was productive instead of wallowing. And it sort of became, it sort of started as something like, oh, I got furloughed and I haven't been working for a while, and now I'm looking for what's next, and blah, blah, blah. And it pretty quickly changed into something like, yeah, I was furloughed in August because of a pandemic. I took a month off, and then I started a consulting business. And since then I've been about as busy as I've ever been. And I'm like working about the same amount, and it's great. And I'm doing, I'm starting my own consulting business, and I'm working with big clients, and I'm building a brand, and I'm working with a startup, and all these things. And what happened was just that reframing of the story of taking control of it, of owning the experience, of taking a month off rather than wallowing in that time. it was sort of freeing. It started to help me think about the future in a different way. It helped me start to think about my past in a different way, in a sort of take control of it, rather than something happened to me and then other things happened. Like, things consistently happened to me. It was like, yeah, something happened, and then I shifted and took control of my experience. And that was probably a huge shift in how I was feeling and how I was interacting with other people.
Mm-hmm.
I think around the same time, I heard some radio story about how the power of, defining your own story and how that can shape your life a little bit. And it sort of clicked for me then, like what was happening for me sort of accidentally.
Absolutely. I love that. So just to summarize a few of your points, the first point I heard is what really worked was talking to people, sharing how you were feeling, and not being shy about reaching out, not only to your friends and your wife and your coach, but also to old colleagues, people that you hadn't met before, just reaching out and being in conversation continually. And through the process of being in conversation, being honest about how you were feeling. You weren't, as you were shifting your story, it's not like you were lying, but you were aware of the words you were saying and the story you were telling, and there was a way that you could shift it slightly and reframe it that was much more empowering to you and much more life, taking control of your life versus having life happen to you. And that's really powerful.
Yeah, and owning your own story and your own experience it became hugely powerful for me, right? Like, owning that I needed some time off helped. Owning that I needed to do my own work, and there's an element too of just like talking about the successes that I had in that middle time.
Right.
So like
Focusing on those.
Yeah. Yes. And sort of, and realizing that anything can be a success, right? Like, taking a month off can be a success. That's great.
Yes. Especially when you've got a new baby.
Yeah. Yeah. And building a website can be a success. Doing things in the world, anything can be a success. When I frame things as like I'm trying to do something, it becomes about a progress and about a halt. Like, it becomes a process that has not led to success yet. If I started talking about things as things I've done successfully, it changed how I felt about the past a little bit. It gave me a sense of accomplishment over what I've done, even of taking a month off, even of like anything you can do, you can like, even if I just exercise 3 times that week, like I've been busy this week, and just owning the successes that you've had is an element of that owning your story as well.
I love that. Greg?
I do too. I just want to say that this aligns very closely with our guidance with people if they've lost their confidence in themselves or their ability to take care of themselves or their family. Once you can turn that around and start telling how you're successfully being able to take care of things, even if they're just minor things like taking care of your physical needs and exercising 3 times a week, you can talk about that with confidence, right? The fact that you lost your job, that's not confident. On the other hand, you started a company and you're busier than ever. Wow, the smile that comes on your face from doing that, it's infectious, right? People want to hear that story, and they want to help you tell a better story. So that's the confidence and competence paradigm that everybody's sort of experienced and at some point, I know they have in the last 6 months, is a main driver of spirit drivers, being able to get people back on track. And I really like the way you the new normal for you is the new networking, right?
Yeah.
So we might not be able to touch each other and shake hands and high five, but at the end of the day, we can network like crazy sitting in the basement, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's a great point, Greg. And I would add to that sometimes people have a negative view of networking, like they're trying to get something out of every conversation. And the way I sort of like, I'm just trying to connect with people, you know, and I know that's what you mean by it. And I think sometimes networking is just a dirty word because it's so self-serving or it has the appearance, it can be, people can feel like it's self-serving, but I often went into those conversations with how can I connect with this person and how can I help them? And that was a shift, just realizing this as we're talking, that was a shift that happened for me as well. As I went into panic mode right after I got furloughed, and I went out hard asking for work. And when I went out asking for things, when I went out asking for people to help me, that was less successful than when I went out trying to help other people, and when I went out trying to bring value to other people and connect with other people. And
Right.
and networking is, in my view, it's just about connecting with people and trying to help other people, and it just pays dividends. You're right.
Mm-hmm. So the go bigger philosophy.
We're going to start using the phrase "the new networking" here, I think, because it is the new networking, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. There's an amazing book called The Go Giver, and it's a whole, there are actually multiple books under that name, and it's, there's a website, there's a whole community called The Go Giver, and it's all about that. It's all about showing up with that spirit of generosity and that spirit of, how can I serve? How can I help this person? How can I help them get clients? How can I help them get work? What can I give? And just having that thought in mind all the time is a huge shift, especially when you are in a position where you're also looking for something. It's not always easy to make. Yeah.
It's hard when you're in a deep place too. Like, right. It's hard when you really do need help. It's good to ask for it first. And two, like it's good to try and help other people. Yeah. Sorry, I cut you off.
No, that was all. So I want to ask you now, Jason, how do you see the business landscape right now? Because it's, of course, shifting, and a lot of people are going through tough times, but there's also a lot of opportunity out there. So what's your take on it?
Yeah. So I want to confine my perspective a little bit to my corner of the world, because I know there are a lot of people that are hurting, and the economy is doing some strange things right now. Tech sector is going crazy, and the service sector is just plummeting, and it's really challenging for a lot of people out there. Most of my career has been in building businesses, building new products, and looking for the sort of what is the future of things, what's growth, and where does the future growth come from. And the way I tend to see, the way I tend to think about the world, and it's useful for me at least, is like the world is always changing, and sometimes we enter periods of like more change, bigger flux, and sometimes we have periods of lower change, like less flux. Things are more stable, but things are never stable in my mind. And the way I started to think about the pandemic and the just craziness in the job market and the economy and things like that, and just fundamentally how the world works right now, is because we're in such a state of flux. It's really an opportunity. The biggest changes, or let me say, the biggest opportunity for change in the economy and people is when we have these moments of crisis. That's the biggest opportunity for change. It's the point when we start to question the fundamental underpinnings of who we are as a person, as a company, as a people, as a population, as a government. Of any of these things, we start to really question, like, does that thing that we've always assumed to be true, is it still true? And when we start to question those fundamental tenets or underpinnings, that's when real change and rapid change becomes a reality. And that's where we are right now. And I tend to think there are probably, oversimplifying, but there are basically two kinds of people that are acting right now. The people that think, okay, I'm just going to wait until the dust settles and it clears, and then I'll reassess and figure out what to do. And that's totally cool. Like, that's great. I think there are other companies out there that have the opportunity to say, okay, the world is changing right now, and we don't know what it's going to look like, but maybe we can influence it a little bit. Maybe we can shape it in a way that we want it to be different in the future. And I think tech companies are definitely doing that. And I think a few other companies are starting to do that because they're realizing that this pandemic is not a momentary blip. It's a sort of a longer thing that we have to deal with, and they have to live in this new normal. And I think those are the companies those are the companies to target right now. Those are the companies that are going to be the winners in the new economy after this, or in the new world after this, the 5 years, the 10 years from now. Because if going back to that model of high flux and low flux, when the world is in low flux, like low change times, if you can be preparing yourself for the high change times, you're going to be really successful because you can take advantage during those high change times. And for me, the one of the things I think about as my work is brings me into thinking about the future all the time. Is like, we can never really know what it's going to be like, but the closest thing we have to a crystal ball is to create what's going to happen, right? Like, you don't know what's going to happen, but the more influence you can exert on the future, the better, the closer to the outcome you want to happen is going to be, right? And so that's the best way to know the future is to create the future. And that, to me, is where all the business opportunity is right now, is thinking about sort of giving up what we knew is normal before and saying, okay, how do we need to act now? What's true now? What's changed that we never thought would change? And sort of aggressively going after those things.
Wow. Beautifully said. What would you say to somebody who wants to be proactive and wants to be creating and shaping the future, but isn't quite sure how?
Yeah, I think I would probably go back to the storytelling thing. And the thing that I sort of accidentally did with myself and my personal story, it's something I've done for work in the past too. And it's something that my coach has worked with me on. And being really, so start to tell the story that you want in the future. So pick a timeline, pick 1 year, 5 years, whatever you want. And I think it's probably good to do multiple of these, maybe 1, 5, and 10 years, and sit down and actually write what you want your life to be like in that time frame. And sometimes it's good to start in the distance, and sometimes it's good to start in a near time and edit these. But write down what you actually want your life to be like at that point. Or if you're at work, write down what you want your team or what you want your company to be like in that time frame. And be as concrete as possible. If you're thinking about yourself, write a day in the life. What is my day like? What am I having for breakfast? And be really concrete about these things and what's important to you and what you want that future to look like. And once you've done that, I would share it with somebody. I would get other people to read it, and I would say, like, share it with your spouse, share it with your closest friends, and say, like, you know me pretty well. Is this like, what is this true for what you know? Excuse me, what you know about me? And start to share it. And then once you've had your story, like, think every day, what's one thing I can do today? What's one thing I can do this week to get me closer to that story, to get me closer to what I want my life to be like in that time frame? And repeat, right? Like, repeat every day, every week, every month, and maybe every year. look at your story again and say, is that really the story that I want? Because God knows if you, we all change so much in 1 year, especially 2020, in 5 years or in 10 years, that story should probably shift, right? But having a goal, having a target on the horizon to aim towards will helps mobilize me, and it helps me sort of orient, make sure I'm doing everything I can to sort of go in that direction.
That reminds me of some science that I read about. This is about visualization, which is essentially what you're talking about. You're talking about imagining the future you want to see, writing it down and creating it in your mind before it actually happens in reality. And one of the things that happens in the brain when you do that is that we have a part of the brain that's called the reticular activating system. And that's the part that sifts through the relevant and non-relevant information in the world because we can't be aware of every single bit of information that comes at us. But when you have activated a visualization of something that you want, your brain will then start to pick up on things relevant to that. So that's why visualization works, is because then you start to notice things that you wouldn't have noticed before that are relevant to the vision that you have just created. And one of the things that we wanted to talk about here was how to spot opportunities. And I think that you just brought up a great way to do that. You spot opportunities by having a clear vision. And then it kind of happens automatically. You'll meet somebody, or you'll come across a website, or you'll, read a book that leads you in the direction of what you want to create.
Yeah, that's a great point. And my coach always says, energy follows attention, which I think is the summary of what you just said, right? Like if you pay attention to something, your energy will flow towards that thing. And then, like you said, things will happen. You'll meet the right people. You'll unlock something. Absolutely. I love that. I've never heard the science. That's great. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. And Greg, this also reminds me of looking out versus looking down.
Oh, absolutely. Because
talk about that?
What's good about Jason's story is that it really falls in line with our recommendations for journaling, right? You could sit down with three pages of paper and say, okay, 1 year, 5 years, and 10 years, life, career, family, location, right? There's health, right? How am I going to hit these goals? What do I really want to be like? You'll start noticing everything about those goals and how you can reach them from the experiences and the information that you're coming across. And what a great way to sift through all the information that we're getting these days, because we're getting a lot.
Right.
We're getting
information overload. Yeah, and it's so important to do that, to have that clear picture, because otherwise you're just blown around by the news and by all of the different stimuli that hit you. You're like a leaf in the wind versus a river going in a direction.
Yeah, whenever I come up from the basement and chat with my wife, and I'm complaining about something, work or otherwise, she says, "What do you want?"
That's a good question. Yeah.
And I'm like,
life is good for you.
Yeah, it's great. It's really, it's the best question I think anybody can ask themselves or have somebody ask them. It's like you're complaining a lot, and that's fine, but what do you want to happen? And either ask for that or do that. And that's, I don't know, it's just great to have somebody remind me of that once in a while.
That's awesome. Yeah.
That is awesome, Jason. Wow.
I try to do that with my husband. I don't know if he would say that I'm always successful, but yeah, it's always revert back to diverting your attention towards your vision, towards what it is that you want, because we do have a tendency to get stuck in just a complaint, right? And talk about it and reactivate it and, get ourselves down about it, when we can shift our attention, we can shift our story to what it is that we're creating out of that situation. And that's our choice. Yeah. And it's a practice.
Yeah.
And it's really good for people to remind you, because it happens to all of us.
It helps people practice, right?
So we've mostly covered most of the questions that we had for you. Is there anything you want to share? Anything else that you want to share with the audience about what you see as possible right now?
Oh gosh, what a big question. Yeah, I guess I tend to think there's not much that's not possible right now. Like pretty much anything is possible right now, and I find myself both struggling with and trying to take one small step a day. Like that to me is one thing I've started to do is I'll write down every day. I have no more than like 2 goals for the day. And that doesn't mean I only do 2 things in the day, but it means I only have 2 goals for the day. And oftentimes one is a work goal, and oftentimes one's a more personal goal. And I started to track myself, and I asked myself 2 questions at the end of the day. I'll say, were these the right goals, and did I accomplish them? And even just having those things up and asking myself that question over and over again helps me, as you so rightly said, Elise, like helps me practice, right? Helps me identify what I want to do, and helps me sort of hold myself accountable to doing those things. And every once in a while, the goal is to not work, right? Like I had a 4-day weekend this past weekend, and it was awesome. And I purposely did not work the entire time, and that was great. And so for me, the possibilities in the world are there's just so many of them right now. There's so many opportunities. I think there are jobs starting to come back, and I think it's going to be hard in the service sector for a long time. But I know people in those industries, and I know people that work in hotels. I just know from experience is like some of the hardest working and some of the broadest skill sets, and really applicable to different places. And so I know service skills are applicable to different places. It's a matter of identifying where you want to put your skills and what you want to happen in the world, and then start doing it. It's as hard and it's as simple as just starting to do things, right? And simple and easy are rarely the same, right? And anybody that's been in a relationship that they knew they needed to end knows why something is simple and hard at the same time. But like just taking some steps and making some progress, doesn't matter how small that progress will create momentum, and a little bit more momentum helps move things forward. And it's amazing once you start doing that, how quickly I've experienced how quickly something can happen.
I want to go back.
That's fabulous advice, especially the part about just list 2 things that you are sure you want to get done today. Yeah. Not 5, not 20, right? Because you'll do 5 and 20, but just the 2. It is a tremendous confidence builder just to be able to say that, right?
Yeah. I think I used to be a big list maker, and I would have a 20 thing list every day, and it would be as detailed as like email this person, and I've backed off that, and I said that stuff happens. I don't need to take lists of it, but what's one like slightly bigger thing that I want to happen today, and what's one goal that I have today, or 2 goals that I have today, and it's helped me a ton too. It just helps me like just think differently about my time and how do I want to use my time.
Yeah, it's so valuable. And just going back to another thing that you said at the beginning, which was celebrating every achievement, is so important, because we live in a culture that is really a not enough culture. And it's like you could never measure up. You can always be not enough. You could do everything on your list and have it still not be enough. Mm-hmm. Or you can have everything you do be enough. And that's another choice and another practice. And I'm speaking to myself as much as everyone else. But if I can celebrate all of the things that I did do instead of thinking of all of the things constantly that there are still to do and that I haven't done yet and all the ways that I fell short, it's a game changer for me. And it's like, that's something that I'm actively practicing. Greg knows very well that I'm actively practicing is to be in celebration of myself, because that is how you build your confidence.
Yeah,
like I painted my nails the other day and I was like, I am so proud of myself for painting my nails. Like I took time to sit still long enough to do that for myself. And that I am very proud of.
yeah.
And especially if you're in a tough place, it's those tiny things. It's the tiny, tiny things like that you start to celebrate, and you start to lift your confidence up, and you start to build momentum.
Yeah, like I can vouch for that. As you know, having a newborn, sometimes a win for the day was taking a shower, and that's
I remember the days.
and that maybe reset my perspective on that stuff a little bit. In the same way that you're talking about, Elise, is just like the smallest thing can be a win.
Yeah, like I made my bed.
Yeah. It also reminds me of something something you said about the success there that reminded me of there's a psychologist that is all about happiness psychology, and there's a guy that wrote a book, I think his name is Sean Anker, and he wrote a book called The Happiness Advantage. And his premise is that we think that success makes us happy, but it's actually the other way around. Being happy makes us more successful.
Right.
And what I think you identified there is there's an element that he talks about is like when we if we chase success, we always fall short because we're always moving the goalpost. And if success was graduating high school, then it's graduating college, then it's getting the job, then it's getting the raise, then it's getting the promotion. And we're always resetting the goalpost on ourselves to what success is and measuring it outside of ourselves. But if we look for opportunities to just be happy with what we have and what we've already done, which I think is what you're talking about, is like, I did something today. I've accomplished something. I took a step forward. I went for a walk. I went for a run. I painted my nails. I took a shower, whatever it is. An opportunity to be happy with where we are. The success sort of is more likely to follow if you're already happy. Your attention will be better. Your brain works better. All sorts of different things.
Yeah, and you interact with people in a more effective way too, which speaks back again to how you were being when you were kind of desperate and grasping right after you lost your job versus showing up with a clear mind, wanting to help, relaxed, just trying to connect with the person. Totally changes the game.
So on point, yeah. So I can't think of anything else.
I think we rang it out of him, Elise. You've done well, Jason. Thank you for putting up with us.
Yeah, and this has been great. Even just telling the story over and over again has diffused it so much for me, and it makes it easier to talk about. And I want to thank Elise, you and Greg for having me and allowing me to tell my story. And I hope that somebody can get something out of it. And I'm always happy to chat with people individually. You can find me on LinkedIn or any number of places. But thank you so much for the time today.
Yeah,
thank you for your time.
So much, Jason. Great. Well, we're going to wrap up here. So we will say goodbye to you, Jason. Thank you again for being here.
Awesome.
And wow. That was fantastic. So much goodness, so much visionary energy in that conversation. I feel really inspired, and I really got a lot out of that, a lot of good reminders for me.
I think I got a lot out of it also. I want to remind anyone that's listening in or watching later to go to our website and get our free guide. It's very easy to get. You put in your name and an email address. We won't share it with anyone but it'll pop right up on the screen for you. It's a very useful tool, and it follows along with many of the principles that you heard today, and many of the principles that we constantly advise ourselves and our clients to follow. Take advantage of it.
Absolutely. So go visit us at spiritdrivers.com, learn more about what we're doing, and anything else, Greg? We're going to be back here next Tuesday with another awesome guest. Some more wisdom.
Yes. Who's our guest next Tuesday?
Oh gosh, I'm going to have to look at the calendar.
That's okay. We'll be back on next Tuesday at 9:30 Eastern time.
That's right. And it'll be somebody awesome. Don't worry.
We always have awesome people there, and they tend to reinforce a lot of the guidance that we give ourselves and that we offer our clients.
Yeah,
Thank you for the day.
Yeah, thank you so much. And thank you for watching and being part of the Spirit Drivers community. So we'll see you next time. Ciao.